The first thing I noticed wasn't a sound. It was the lack of one. We live our lives wrapped in a blanket of white noise. The hum of the refrigerator, the distant roll of tires on asphalt, the rhythmic thrum of our own blood in our ears. When I opened my eyes at 6:14 a.m., that blanket had been ripped away. The silence was heavy, physical, like a hand pressed against my chest. I sat up in bed, my breath hitching. My wife, Sarah, was gone. The sheets on her side were cold, but not just left for work cold. They felt as though they had never been slept in at all. I called her name and my voice didn't echo. It didn't even travel. The air felt thick, swallowing the sound before it could reach the bedroom door. I walked to the window and pulled back the curtains. My heart stopped. The street wasn't there. The neighbors' houses, the oak trees, the cracked sidewalk. Everything was gone. In its place was an infinite, flat expanse of gray sand under a sky the color of a bruised lung. There were no stars. There was no sun. Just a dull, sourceless luminescence that cast no shadows. I wasn't in my bedroom anymore. My house, or at least my bedroom, was sitting like a discarded toy in the middle of a wasteland. I ran to the door and threw it open. The rest of the house was gone. The doorway led directly onto the gray sand. I looked back, and the room was fraying at the edges, the wallpaper peeling into gray ash that dissolved before it hit the floor. "Sarah," I whispered. "She's not here, Julian." I whirled around. Standing a few yards away was a man I didn't recognize. He was dressed in a tattered business suit, his skin so pale it was almost translucent. He was holding a rusted birdcage with no bird inside. "Who are you?" I demanded, my voice trembling. "Where am I? Where is my wife?" "Names don't matter much here," he said, his eyes fixed on the empty cage. "But you can call me Arthur. As for where we are, we're in the waiting room, and you're the first one to wake up with your room still intact. That's a good sign, or a very bad one." Arthur explained that the shift happened while we slept. One moment, the world was a thriving blue marble. The next, it was this. He didn't know why. He only knew the rules. Stay moving. Don't look at the horizon for too long. And never, under any circumstances, answer a voice that sounds like someone you love. We began to walk. The gray sand muffled our footsteps. Every few miles, we would see remnants of the old world. A lone telephone pole, a burnt-out car, a single staircase leading nowhere. These weren't just objects. They were anchors, pieces of reality that hadn't quite dissolved yet. As the day, if you could call it that, wore on, the psychological weight began to settle. The horizon started to pulse. It wasn't a visual pulse, but a rhythmic throb that I felt in my teeth. "Do you hear that?" I asked. Arthur stopped. His face went gray. "Don't listen. It's the hum of the machine." "What machine?" "The one that's erasing us," he whispered. Suddenly, a voice drifted across the sand. Clear, sweet, heartbreakingly familiar. "Julian, help me. It's so cold." It was Sarah. I turned, my heart leaping into my throat. About 50 yards away, a figure stood in the haze. She was wearing the blue dress she wore on our anniversary. "Sarah!" I started to run. "No!" Arthur grabbed my arm with surprising strength. "Look at her feet, Julian. Look at her feet." I slowed down, squinting through the gloom. Sarah was standing there, reaching out to me, but she didn't have feet. Below the hem of the blue dress, her legs simply tapered off into wisps of gray smoke that merged with the sand. The thing that looked like Sarah tilted its head, its jaw unhinged, dropping far lower than a human jaw should. "Julian," it said, but the voice was no longer Sarah's. It sounded like grinding metal. "The world didn't end. You just forgot to pay the rent." The figure dissolved into a swarm of black shapes. Not birds, but jagged shards of something that looked like broken glass, and flew toward the horizon. Arthur let go of my arm. He was shaking. "They're called echoes. They feed on the memory of what we lost. If you touched her, you would have become one of them." We kept walking, but I realized then that survival wasn't about finding food or water. It was about holding onto the pieces of myself that were still human before the gray sand claimed them. 2. By the second day, the landscape began to change. The flat sand gave way to a forest of rusted girders and concrete pillars that stretched into the sky until they disappeared. It was like walking through the skeleton of a dead city. Arthur was becoming weaker. His skin was turning the color of the sand, and he kept forgetting words. The thing you sit on. In the morning. To eat. He muttered. A chair, Arthur. I said, my own chest tightening. Right? A chair. I can't remember what color mine was. This was the true horror of the wasteland. It didn't just take your world. It took your mind. Every memory that faded made you more transparent. I spent hours reciting my life story to myself. My name is Julian Thorne. I was a structural engineer. I lived at 42 Oak Lane. My wife's name was Sarah. She smelled like lavender and rain. We found a shelter of sorts, a section of a subway tunnel that had materialized in the middle of a girder field. Inside, we found others. There were 5 of them. A woman named Clara, a young boy who wouldn't speak, and 3 men who sat in a circle, staring at a single, unlit light bulb hanging from a wire. Clara was the only one who looked fully solid. She was clutching a photograph so tightly her knuckles were white. You found an anchor, she said, looking at me. Your room. Most people wake up in the sand. They don't last long. What is this place? I asked. Clara looked at the unlit bulb. It's a glitch. We think the world is a simulation that ran out of memory. Or maybe it's a dream of something much larger that finally woke up. Either way, we're the leftovers. The junk data. She told me about the collectors. They weren't like the echoes. The echoes were emotional parasites, but the collectors were functional. They were the ones cleaning up the data. That night, the light bulb flickered to life. The 3 men in the circle screamed. They didn't scream in pain, but in terror, as their bodies began to pixelate. I watched, paralyzed, as their limbs turned into blocks of gray light. They were being deleted in real time. Run! Clara shouted, grabbing the boy. We scrambled out of the tunnel just as a massive, geometric shape descended from the sky. It wasn't a creature. It was a monolith of shifting black polygons. It made a sound like 1,000 hard drives crashing at once. We ran through the girder forest, the sound of the deletion following us. Arthur tripped. I turned back to help him, but he was already half gone. His legs were a smear of gray static. Julian, he gasped, his eyes wide. I remember the chair. It was red, like blood. He smiled, and then he was gone. Not dead, just absent. The space where he had been was now just more sand. Clara, the boy, and I found a small outcrop of Real rock, a piece of a mountain that had survived. We huddled there, the sound of the monolith fading into the distance. Why did the light turn on? I asked. Clara looked at her photograph. It was a picture of a garden. Because we noticed it. Attention is the currency here. If you focus on something for too long, the system notices you're still here, tries to fix the error. I looked at my hands. They were pale but still solid. I realized that my survival was a paradox. To stay real, I had to remember my life, but if I remembered it too clearly, I would draw the attention of the collectors. I had to exist in the margins of my own consciousness. The boy finally spoke. He looked at me with eyes that were too old for his face. The world didn't go away, Julian. We did. We're the ones who fell out. Days bled into weeks. The boy vanished during a storm of gray ash. Clara eventually walked into the horizon, her photograph having faded to a blank white square. I was alone. I was no longer Julian Thorne. I was a collection of fading facts. Engineer, Oak Lane, lavender. I reached the edge. It wasn't a cliff or a wall. It was a line where the gray sand simply stopped, and a void of pure, terrifying white began. I stood at the precipice, looking into the white. There was no sound, no hum, just a vast, empty potential. You're the last one, a voice said. I didn't turn around. I knew the voice. It was mine. A figure stepped up beside me. It looked exactly like I did the day I woke up. clean-shaven, wearing my favorite flannel shirt. He looked solid. He looked real. "Who are you?" I whispered, my voice a dry husk. "I'm Julian," he said. "The real one." He looked into the white void. The shift wasn't an apocalypse. It was a migration. Humanity moved up. They uploaded, they evolved, they transcended. Whatever you want to call it. They left the physical world behind because it was too fragile. I looked at my own translucent hands. "Then what am I?" "You're the trash file," he said with a sad smile. "When you move a folder to a new drive, sometimes a few bits get left behind. Corrupted fragments. Memories that didn't quite transfer. That's what this place is. It's the recycling bin of the universe." I felt a surge of cold fury. "So we're just discarded thoughts?" "Not even thoughts. Just echoes of thoughts. But the system is finishing its final wipe. That's why everything is disappearing. I'm the last part of the active Julian to be processed. I'm here to close the door." He reached out and touched my shoulder. His hand was warm. It was the first human touch I'd felt that didn't feel like stone or ash. "Is there anything in there?" I asked, gesturing to the white void. "Everything," he said. "Sarah is there. The sun is there. But you can't go as you are. You're too broken. You're corrupted data." He stepped back, and the white void began to bleed into the gray sand. The deletion was starting one last time. "Wait," I cried. "If I'm just a fragment, how can I feel this much? How can it hurt?" The real Julian looked at me, and for a second, his image flickered. He looked scared. "That's the glitch," he whispered. "The part they couldn't figure out how to code. The suffering. They left it all behind. With you." He turned and stepped into the white. The void swallowed him instantly. I stood on the shrinking island of gray sand. The monoliths were closing in. The sky was turning white. I closed my eyes and tried to remember the smell of lavender and rain, but the memories were like sand slipping through my fingers. But then, I felt something else. A flicker of a memory that wasn't mine. I saw a laboratory. I saw scientists in white coats. I saw a screen displaying a progress bar. Deletion 99.9% complete. And then I saw a man sitting in a chair, a red chair. He was wearing a headset. His face was twisted in an expression of absolute, soul-shattering agony. "He's not responding," a voice in the lab shouted. "The ego fragment is stuck in the subroutine. If we don't wipe it, the main upload will collapse." "We can't wipe it," another voice said. "It's the subconscious. It's the part of him that wants to be punished. The guilt for what he did to Sarah." I opened my eyes. The gray sand was gone. The white void was gone. I was standing in my bedroom at 42 Oak Lane. Sarah was there, lying in bed. But she wasn't sleeping. Her eyes were open, staring at the ceiling, glassy and fixed. Beside her was an empty bottle of pills. My pills. I looked at my hands. They were covered in her blood. The room began to flicker. The walls peeled back to reveal the gray sand. The real Julian's voice echoed in my head, but it wasn't a voice of transcendence anymore. It was a loop. "The world didn't go away, Julian," it whispered. "You just couldn't live in it anymore." I realized the truth. There was no simulation. There was no migration. There was only a mind that had shattered under the weight of a terrible crime, creating a wasteland to hide in. I sat on the edge of the bed and waited for the collectors. But they didn't come. They never come for the things that are already dead. I woke up at 6:14 a.m. The first thing I noticed wasn't a sound. It was the lack of one.